Did you know that Austria-Hungary was planning to sign a separate peace treaty with the Entente as early as 1916, but they had a real shot at succeeding in 1917 with the Sixtus Affair. This would mean that Austria-Hungary gets to keep most of their territory, so in the post-war world everything would be completely different, as Germany and Italy would for sure go ultranationalist, but be unable to partition the Habsburg Empire. Austria-Hungary surrendering just a year earlier would change world history quite a lot. This is how the Austro-Hungarian Empire could have betrayed Germany in the Great War. After the Austro-Hungarian Emperor Franz Joseph I died, he was succeeded by Charles I, who was looking to exit the Great War. Charles I made contact with his brother-in-law Prince Sixtus of Bourbon-Parma, who was an officer in the Belgian army, who later made contact with the French government. The French conditions for peace were that France would get Alsace-Lorraine, install independent Belgium, and make Serbia independent from Austrian influence. All of these points were accepted by Charles I. The reason why this plan failed is because Italy was promised Austrian lands in the Treaty of London in 1915, and Charles I didn't think that the Italians deserved them as for their performance in the Great War. The main problem, however, was that Austria-Hungary needed to accept Russian control over Constantinople. This meant that Austria-Hungary's position in the Balkans would be greatly weakened, but the Austrians hoped that Russia's rival of Britain would eventually change the status of Constantinople to an international city. The Sixtus Affair failed because it was unpopular, as the Central Powers were appearing to win the war in 1916. It officially failed as the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was signed, dropping Russia out of the war. This encouraged Austria-Hungary that they would win the war and enter the Kaisertum universe. Germany eventually discovered the plans for the Austro-Hungarian surrender, as the letters exchanged between Austria and France were published to the whole world to see. There was fear in Austria-Hungary that Germany may invade them, with the goal to force them to continue the war. This didn't happen, but Germany strengthened their grip over Austria-Hungary and made the Germans control foreign relations on behalf of Austria, as to prevent such another attempt at leaving the war. Obviously, we all know how the Great War ended for Austria-Hungary. The thing is that at the time, nobody expected Austria-Hungary to completely collapse. It was expected they would lose some or a lot of territory, but the country would still continue to exist. This, however, wasn't the case, so with the power of hindsight, we know that Austria-Hungary betraying the Germans and leaving the war in 1917 would be a good idea for the Habsburgs. We also know that if the Austro-Hungarian Empire were to do that, they would get invaded by Germany, so let's see how this would affect the entire world. I cannot tell you how this is possible to happen, as if it was likely, it would have happened in our universe. The fact that this didn't happen suggests that it was really unlikely, so keep that in mind. The more likely option for this to happen would be for the French Prime Minister Aristide Briand to remain in charge. He was an interesting candidate, as he had plans for an European Economic Union as early as 1929. So his policy was one of peace and economic integration. Historically, he was succeeded by Alexandre Ribot, who was again signing a separate peace agreement with Austria-Hungary, hence why the Sixtus Affair failed. The other problem with the Sixtus Affair was that it didn't mention which lands Serbia and Romania would get. Technically, it didn't mention the Italian lands as well, but we can assume that it would be the Treaty of London in 1915. I would say that France would grant Serbia all of Bosnia and Herzegovina, while also giving the Serbians the entirety of Albania as compensation for not getting more Austrian lands. The reason for this is simple: the French can bully the Albanians, which is preferred than fighting the Austro-Hungarian Empire for longer, as it was occupying vital Entente resources that could have gone to fighting Germany instead. Serbia will not be too happy about this, but I don't think that they would have any other choice. In 1917, they were practically kicked out of the Balkans and became a government in exile. The Serbian troops escaped through neutral Albania, which prompted the Central Powers to do a friendly invasion and catch the Serbians. This would further my point as why I think Serbia would get all of Albania. At the time, Albania was a principality, led by Wilhelm, Prince of Albania, the second cousin of Wilhelm II. As Germany would eventually get defeated and the German royal family would be stripped of their titles, it makes no sense for a German to rule Albania, and this is exactly what happened historically. In the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, Albania was forced to become a republic, which eventually happened. This time, Wilhelm, Prince of Albania, could abdicate, and the Albanians can enter a personal union with the Serbians and Peter I. Considering that Serbia didn't control any of their core territory in 1917, they could agree to at least getting something and continue the war against Bulgaria. This is one issue resolved, which is the lands that Serbia would get, and as for Romania, I would say that they would get most of southern Transylvania. This would satisfy the Romanians, as in 1917, they were mostly occupied by the Central Powers, so they would get to walk out of this war with some additional territory. The final country to mention is Russia, which did claim Galicia, but it was unreasonable for them to get it right away, considering how far back they were pushed by the Germans. The Russians would be thrilled to get Constantinople as compensation, as promised to them by the French, so for now, there wouldn't be a problem. In summary, Austria-Hungary would lose land to Italy, which didn't perform too well in the war, to Serbia, which had capitulated to the Habsburgs, and Romania, which also capitulated in the Great War. The Austrians would be giving up lands to countries that they deemed didn't deserve it, so the Sixtus Affair would not only make Germany mad, but also the whole population of Austria-Hungary. So, these are the terms of the Austrian surrender on the 24th of March 1917. So, the Austro-Hungarian Empire would do exactly that and leave the war that they started, abandoning their ally of Germany. The Germans would be outraged, so an invasion of Austria-Hungary would be possible. The thing is that Germany didn't have any forces to spare, so either they pull out some troops from France and Russia to deal with Austria-Hungary, or they let this betrayal slide. Honestly, I don't know if the Germans would invade Austria-Hungary or not, so I will do both scenarios. If the Germans don't invade, this could encourage Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire, the remaining Central Powers members, to also abandon Germany and gain favorable peace deals. This is because there would be no consequences for them, and in the case of Bulgaria, they can end up growing in size, while the Ottoman Empire can prevent total collapse. Immediately after Austria-Hungary drops out of the war and Germany lets it slide, Bulgaria would do the same, where France would promise them their former territories in North Macedonia as before the Second Balkan War, and potentially southern Dobruja from Romania. This is because Serbia and Romania didn't do too well in the Great War, while the Bulgarians were dominating the Balkans. France has to force Serbia and Romania to comply with these demands, as these countries cannot survive on their own without France's support. Additionally, France would hope to free up some important resources. Rather than them going and capitulating Bulgaria, where France doesn't have a lot to gain, the French would force this peace treaty and have some more resources that could go towards fighting Germany. Overall, France would hope to gain more lands from Germany, not only Alsace-Lorraine. The Ottomans would also follow suit, where they would lose a lot of territory, including Constantinople, but would get to keep most of Syria and Iraq. This would leave Germany alone in this war, so it's fair to say that they would soon be defeated. In the peace treaty, I would have France take Alsace-Lorraine and the Saarland directly, while making a Rhineland protectorate. Russia would take the Polish majority regions of Germany and potentially form a Polish kingdom. Since the United States of America just joined the war, their ideas of self-determination introduced by Woodrow Wilson will not side well with the Europeans. This is because I'd say that this alternate war ends by mid-1917 and the Americans joined on the 4th of April 1917. Basically, the Europeans wouldn't listen to America's demands, as the United States of America fought for only 2 or 3 months in the war. Germany could be potentially broken up into smaller states, which I'd say was desired by France and Russia. Since this is the most unrealistic part of the scenario, I'd say that these plans go through and Germany is completely partitioned. To summarize, in this ending, Germany would not be punishing Austria-Hungary for their betrayal, leading to the other Central Powers members to also decide to leave, resulting in a shorter war and a quicker German defeat. This is a potential ending to the Great War, but the other alternative of Germany invading Austria-Hungary is more interesting, so I will go with this one. These acts of Germany would make Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire think twice before abandoning Germany, so they would remain in the war for now. As for the German invasion of Austria-Hungary, it would go well initially, but stall eventually. This is because of the shared mountainous front line on both sides, making any advances more difficult. The last hope for Germany would be to dash to Vienna and somehow depose Charles I and force Austria-Hungary back into the war. Even if the Germans were to somehow capture Vienna, Charles I can simply flee to Budapest and remain there, where Germany cannot capture him and force him to abdicate. Germany, however, has the advantage of the Austrian public not being fine with their country losing lands to countries that didn't perform well in the war. The Germans can potentially arm these people and get them on their side, starting a civil war in Austria-Hungary. The thing is that I don't think that this would be too successful, as perhaps most of Austria-Hungary were happy to end this war and focus on their internal affairs. After all, Charles I was called the Reformer King, so he would reform and improve the country. This is the reason why I think that the German campaign would be a total disaster. Additionally, Germany had to pull troops away from the eastern and western front as to do this failed operation, so Germany has now forced itself into a three-front war. The Entente has another advantage, which is Greece. I think it's more likely for the Greeks to enter the war as soon as Austria-Hungary capitulates, hoping to gain Bulgarian and Ottoman lands. Historically, Bulgaria surrendered shortly after Greece joined the war, as they were being pushed back on the Macedonian front. The Bulgarian High Command ordered the soldiers to keep fighting, but these soldiers marched on the Bulgarian capital Sofia and demanded an end to the war. This I think would also repeat in this war, so Bulgaria would drop out and open up the way for Constantinople, which I think would also fall. This time Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire didn't sign a separate peace treaty, but were properly invaded, so they would lose a lot of land and influence. Of course, this would delay the eventual capitulation of the Germans, making the desire of self-determination introduced by the Americans more likely to occur. Still, I expect the war to be a couple of months shorter than it was historically, but Germany would eventually be defeated in an alternate way. Let me show you the peace treaty, but also how the Second World War could look like. I already discussed the peace terms of Austria-Hungary, so here's that. As for Bulgaria, I expect exactly the same peace deal to follow upon them. The Ottoman Empire will be presented with a similar peace treaty as the one of Sevres, leading to a Turkish War of Independence. The thing is that I don't think that Mustafa Kemal can win this one. The first reason is for the absence of the Soviet Union, which by the way never rose to power. This I think it's possible because after the February Revolution, Russia would become a provisional government led by Alexander Kerensky, and Tsar Nicholas II would be forced to abdicate. Additionally, just a month after this would happen, Austria-Hungary would surrender. The provisional government can use this as a political victory and assure the people that peace and victory is in sight. This would greatly damage the Bolshevik Revolution, which's slogan was peace and bread. For the common Russian, it looked like the war was going to be won any second now, so it made it unnecessarily for them to support the Bolsheviks. Another thing that I think would happen for the Russians as to further my claim that the October Revolution would not happen is that after Austria-Hungary has capitulated, the spare Russian troops can be used to hold their German advances, so Germany may never reach Ukraine. After the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria have capitulated, Russia would have even more forces they can use to suppress the communists and to push Germany back. This would maybe prevent the rise of the Soviet Union, but it's not all good news for Russia. With no Soviet Union, Mustafa Kemal loses their biggest supporter, but also Russia is determined to fight them, as they want to keep their hold of Constantinople, which was promised to them by France and Austria-Hungary. This means that Greece would win the Greco-Turkish War and gain all of their claimed territories, while the Ottoman Empire stands humiliated. I have discussed all the Central Powers members except Germany, so let's explore the region. As the American ideas of self-determination are introduced, the Europeans cannot take as much as they would like. France and Belgium would get what they had historically, with Denmark getting some free land as well. Colonially, I see Germany losing their colonies in exactly the same way as they did historically. As for Russia, I think that the Russians would create a Polish kingdom, allied and being subject to the Russians for two reasons. The first reason is because Russia was on life support during the Great War, and even if they win in this alternate timeline, they would still be very unstable. Giving the Poles more autonomy would satisfy them temporarily, freeing up the Russian resources to deal with rebellions elsewhere. This has the goal to stabilize the Russians. For the same reason, I can see Russia making Constantinople an international zone, which means that Russia can still use the port and pass through the Bosphorus freely, but not have to garrison and occupy it. Basically, it would allow Russia to get all of the benefits without any of the negatives, if they make an international Bosphorus zone. I cannot tell you for certain if this would happen, so I'll let you decide for yourself. The other reason for Russia making a Polish kingdom is exactly because of the ideas of self-determination, which means that Poland and by extension Russia would be able to get a lot more territory from Germany, which is all the Polish majority regions of Germany. The German royal house is likely to get stripped of their titles, and a state similar to the Weimar Republic may pop up, with the same army restrictions, war reparations and demilitarized territory. This would leave us with these borders in the 1920s, but the video is not yet over. Italy did gain their promised lands in the Treaty of London, but I think that they would still turn ultranationalist, as the Italian economy was on the decline. Italy fought an expensive war against the Ottoman Empire in 1911-1912, where they only got Libya and the Dodecanese Islands, and after that Italy fought in one more expensive war, which is the Great War. As Italy would turn ultranationalist, Germany may do the same a lot sooner. This is because the Germans would be outraged. In their eyes, they were winning the Great War, but it was the Austrians that betrayed them and destroyed their chances at victory. All of the people in Germany would believe that they were set to win the Great War, but Austria-Hungary betrayed them. This is why an Austrian with a funny mustache who fought on the side of Germany in the Great War may see his popularity rise in the 1920s. The Austrian painter fought for Germany in the Great War, despite being of Austrian origin. This is because he despised Austria-Hungary and wanted Germany to unite all the German speakers. This hate for Austria-Hungary and the desire to unite the German speakers and undo the harm of the Treaty of Versailles would make him extremely popular. Perhaps the beer hall push of 1923 is successful, making Germany an ultranationalist state at the same time as Italy. An alliance between Germany and Italy is a no-brainer, as both seek to destroy Austria-Hungary and gain their lands. Serbia may also join this alliance, as they felt betrayed by France, which only granted them Bosnia and Herzegovina. Of course, the Serbians and the Italians would have a lot of conflicting claims, but so did Germany and Italy over South Tyrol in the Second World War, so for the time being, this alliance may last. Romania may also want to join this alliance, which I will call the Axis, again with the goal to take all of Transylvania, but perhaps also Bessarabia from Russia. The Germans have ambitions to strike Russia and restore their former glory, so Romania would be totally on board with this alliance. Russia and the former Entente of France and Britain may fall out in terms of relations due to the issue of Constantinople, but also because Britain and Russia were historical rivals. The French would either remain allied with Russia or with the United Kingdom, but not with both. For the sake of this video, I'd say that they remain allied with the British, whose goal is to keep the status quo and prevent the rise of Germany or Russia. Greece may also join this alliance, with Belgium, despite being neutral, sympathizing with it. The Russians, if abandoned, are likely to make their own faction, which I think would only include Bulgaria for the time being, but also target Hungary. The goal of the Axis is to destroy Austria-Hungary, with Germany and Romania hoping to destroy Russia as well, and eventually Germany and Italy would turn on France and take their claimed lands. The goal of the Entente is to keep the status quo, as I said earlier, while the goal of the Russians is also one where they take Austrian territory and ally with Hungary, forming a buffer state between them and Romania. The most important goal for Russia is to keep their country together and grow stronger, eventually to dominate the European continent. The thing is that Germany cannot expand for free with the appeasement strategy that happened historically. France is in a stronger position and would most likely defend all of the Benelux, while Russia is strong and would defend Poland. This means that Germany can either expand into Switzerland, Denmark or Austria-Hungary. Since Switzerland is hard to defeat, Germany may expand into Denmark and seize all of Schleswig-Holstein, while establishing an ultranationalist Danish puppet state. This may force Norway to join the Entente together with France and Britain. You may have missed what I just said, but both the German and the Russian side would lay claims on Austro-Hungarian territories, so a partition of the country is really possible. This is why I think that Austria-Hungary would join the side of France and Britain, as the Austrians want to maintain the status quo, which means for them not to get annexed. These are the three sides of this alternate post-war world. I would say that it's more than likely for Germany and Russia to temporarily side together in their goal to conquer and partition Austria-Hungary. This can potentially start a second world war that is even deadlier than the one we had historically. The world has been greatly altered and the rise of Germany is challenged by the Entente and even Russia, who is a temporary ally. At that point the video becomes too difficult to predict, so I suggest you check out this video where Russia restored Byzantium in the 18th century. I hope to see you there and I wish you the best day possible. Goodbye.